Hi Cookie, how are you today? This is day 2, where you're away, and the second night where I promised to read you a bedtime story, even though you're not here. Tonight's story is The Elves and the Shoemaker. Once upon a time, a shoemaker lived with his wife above his workshop. The shoemaker was a good man and he worked hard, but he was very poor. The day came when he had only enough leather to make one pair of shoes. He cut out the leather and then left it on his workbench. "I will be able to make a better pair of shoes after I've had a good night's sleep," he told his wife as they went upstairs. So he's a very sad looking man, but he's very kind. Unfortunately, they have no money. The next morning, bright and early, the shoemaker went downstairs. What a surprise he had! On his workbench, where the leather had been, there was a brand new pair of shoes. They were neatly and perfectly made, with not a stitch out of place. Look at that. "These shoes are masterpieces," the shoemaker exclaimed to his wife. He put them in the window, hoping someone would come and buy them. Sure enough, a finely dressed young man soon entered the workshop to try on the shoes. They fitted perfectly, and they were so handsome that the man happily paid a high price for them. With the money, the shoemaker was able to buy enough leather to make 2 new pairs of shoes. By the time he returned to his shop, he was tired, so he cut out the leather and left it on his workbench. Then he went upstairs to bed. There's the man with the nice new pair of shoes. The next morning, the shoemaker had another surprise. There on the workbench were 2 new pairs of shoes. They were even more beautiful than the first pair, and were just as perfectly made. The shoemaker put them in the window, and before lunchtime, he had sold both pairs for a very good price. Now he had enough money to buy leather for 4 pairs of shoes. There's the first pair, and there's the second pair. Once again, he cut out the leather, left it on his workbench, and went upstairs to bed. And once again, he came down the next morning to find beautiful shoes, all made up and perfectly stitched. The same thing happened every day for weeks. The shoemaker and his wife were not poor anymore. All the new beautiful shoes, and all these shoes over here as well. The shoes had been appearing as if by magic, the shoemaker said to his wife. "But someone must have made them. Who do you think it could be?" "Let's sit up tonight and watch," his wife suggested. "Maybe we can find out." So that night, the shoemaker left some leather all cut up and ready to sew on his workbench as usual. Then instead of going to bed, he and his wife hid behind a curtain at the back of the shop. There, they waited and waited and waited. The shoemaker and his wife were just about to go to bed when, at the stroke of midnight, the shop door opened and in danced 2 tiny elves. They skipped up to the workbench and quickly began sewing the leather into fine new shoes. As they worked, they sang, "We will sew and we will stitch to help the shoemaker grow rich." See? 2 very nice elves. Soon the shoes were finished, and the little elves leapt off the workbench and danced out of the shop. "Those kind elves have helped us," said the shoemaker, astonished. "We must repay them." "Did you see how thin their clothes were?" his wife asked. "And their little feet were bare. Those poor little men must be freezing. Let's make some warm clothes for the elves to show how grateful we are," said the shoemaker. So they don't have many shoes on for themselves at all. The next day, the shoemaker's wife knitted 2 cozy woolen jackets, 2 tiny scarves, and 2 pairs of warm trousers. The shoemaker used his finest leather to make 2 little pairs of boots. All the nice clothes and the new tiny pairs of boots. That night, instead of leaving leather on his workbench, the shoemaker left the clothes all wrapped up in shiny paper and ribbons. Then he and his wife hid behind the curtain to wait. At the stroke of midnight, the shop door opened and in came the little elves. They hopped onto the workbench and saw the presents that had been left for them. They looked very surprised. They opened the parcels at once, and in the twinkling of an eye they had dressed in their brand new clothes. They knew that the presents were the shoemaker's way of saying thank you, and they did a happy dance together singing, "Now the shoemaker's grown rich, there's no need to sew and stitch." Then they hopped off the workbench and scurried out the door. So they looked very happy in their new clothes. The shoemaker and his wife never saw the little elves again, but their troubles were over and they had a good and happy life together for many long years. The end. So that story was The Shoemaker and the Elves. The Elves and the Shoemaker, sorry. I hope you enjoyed it, and hope you have a good night tonight. Sweet dreams and sleep tight. Good night, Cookie.